Welcome to Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Virtual Church. My name is Bradley, and I'm glad we can get together, even though we cannot be together. Today, our minister, the Reverend Jeff Briere, takes his cue from Nike and says, justice. Just do it. Olympia Brown knew something about justice. In 1863, she became the first woman to be ordained by a Christian denomination. Other women had been ordained before in churches here and there, but the ordination of Olympia Brown is the one that we recognize and celebrate as the beginning of women's involvement in the ministry. To accompany the lighting of the chalice, these are the words of Olympia Brown. Stand by this faith. Stand by this faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. We all have different reasons for gathering here each week, but we have this much in common. We work together as a church to transform ourselves, our community, and our world by sharing love, pursuing justice, and seeking wonder. For our prelude today, a song that reminds us that we do our best work in concert with others. This is One Voice.
One spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound people, one voice. A song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
We will sing Loving Kindness next. Please light a candle to dispel the darkness or to bring light to a memory.
My name is Jeff Briere, and I am the minister of this virtual church. I hope you are safe and well. I have a question for you, and there is no right or wrong answer to this question, so you let me know what you think. Here's the question. What is the purpose of this church? I mean, what are we supposed to be doing around here besides attending worship services and committee meetings, eating together on Wednesday nights, having potlucks, New Year's Eve parties, reading books, making music, marching, demonstrating? I mean, what is the purpose of this church? You might say that the purpose of the church is to be a haven, a harbor, a place of safety for those who were wounded in another church. Accordingly, the church should provide care to its members and rebuild their faith. Continuing this nautical metaphor, some will say the purpose of the church is to be a lighthouse, a beacon of truth, or alternative truth, if you will, in this ocean of traditional and conservative Christianity. Others will say that the purpose of this church is to foster discussion and thought about the big questions of the day. The church ought to delve deeply into philosophy and history and theology and sociology and psychology and all the other ologies and discuss the implications thereof. Some would say that the purpose of this church is to provide a gathering place for people of like minds, a place where you can meet other people who think like you do, who won't try to convert you to their way of life, or convince you of your own ruin, or confuse you with contradictory stories. And you might say that this church should help you find God, or whatever ultimate spiritual reality is most meaningful to you. Some would say to develop your spirituality. Some would say to help the poor, or the sick, or the underprivileged. You know what? The church is all that, and more too. As I said, there's no right or wrong answer to the question, what is the purpose of this church? So now I need someone to ask me what I think the purpose of this church is.
What is the purpose of this church, Jeff?
Well, Kate, thank you. I'm glad you asked that. I believe the purpose of this church, I believe the purpose of the church, the big church, the church universal, is to make the world a better place. In more grandiose terms, I believe the purpose of a church is to help establish justice. I believe this church, the Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, this particular church has a purpose, and I believe that we will learn what it is. It may not be what it was years ago, nor what it will be years from now. The purpose of any particular church will change with the times and the culture. But overall, I think the underlying purpose of a religious society is to help establish justice. The presence of justice in a community makes people pretty happy. It promotes economic progress, or permits all people to work together. It includes everyone and excludes no one. Generally makes the world a better place to live. Justice is absolutely critical to a healthy society. Without the hope of equanimity, without the assurance that you will get what you deserve and others what they deserve, we would descend into anarchy and chaos. That's why I co-opted Nike for my sermon title today, Justice. Just do it. I am speaking of democratic justice, an ideal expressed in our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and various laws enacted by the states and localities. Justice in ancient Rome was an entirely different affair. Justice in China, in Bolivia, in Somalia, in Yemen, well, that's not the justice I mean. And now I need someone to ask me why a church, as opposed to the Elks or the Lions, the police or the Republican Party, why a church should be devoted to establishing justice.
Why should a church be interested in establishing justice?
Thank you, Kate. I'm so glad you asked that. The answer is because it's the right thing to do, and it makes the world a better place. And I know it's the right thing to do because the Bible tells me so. I don't often trot out the Bible to support what I believe, but in this case, it gives some religious perspective to a moral enterprise. Like it or not, our legal system is based on that of 17th century England, which in turn was based on the Old Testament and a few ideas thrown in by the Greeks and the Romans. Our legal system is not based on the Quran, nor on the writings of Confucius. It's based on the ideas of justice, first announced by God when he gave Moses his 10 Commandments. Later prophets developed these and put on the finer points. If you examine the laws in this country, if you examine all the laws, you will find that the reason for them, the point behind their existence, what they enforce is a code of conduct that comes from the 10 Commandments. Actually, only 6 of the 10, the big 6, in my opinion, and they are no killing, no lying, no stealing, no screwing around, take care of your mom and dad, and don't be greedy. Those are the big 6. Those 6 concepts are basic to an organized society. They seem to be the basis for a moral code of conduct, and I suspect you will find them to some degree or less in other developed nations. The other 4 commandments, the lesser 4, one God, no pictures, no swearing, and go to church, they seem to support a specific religious practice more than they do underpin a moral code. It's all summed up by the prophet Micah. He says, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God?" Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. That's the reason a church should be interested in establishing justice. That's the reason I know it's the right thing to do. But, justice is not found only in the Bible. The Buddha would recognize the wisdom in Micah's words. So would Confucius, Lao Tzu, and even the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I don't have a scientific basis for this, but I believe it is in our best interest as human beings, regardless of our holy books and our holy teachers, to help establish justice. The goal of any justice movement should be a return to balance. That's why the scales are so often seen as a symbol of justice. When someone or some organization, a person, a corporation, or a government, when they develop too much power, influence, or wealth, the balance will be tipped in that direction. More money will flow to the organization or to the person, which buys more influence and power. And that's how injustice begins, when the scales are tipped out of balance. Nearly every country in this world has some ministry of justice, the goal being the orderly administration of laws and the restraint of criminals. However, the people who work in this ministry, judges, prosecutors, attorneys, they're all human beings, and we know human beings make mistakes. We also recognize that defendants are by nature possessed of less power than the courts, and so we establish special trial procedures, automatic appeals, and other safeguards that rebalance the power differential but do not confer an advantage. But even after all that, innocent people are still convicted of crimes that they did not commit, and sometimes they are executed before we can rectify the situation. We must work to maintain a balance between the interests of a community and the rights of individual defendants. Criminals must be restrained, but not by trigger-happy police, and not run over by an overzealous prosecutor. Environmental justice refers to efforts to foster a sustainable way of life in our communities when the people who live there exploit the finite resources of the earth. Water and soil conservation, the reform of agricultural practices, recycling, the preservation of wetlands and other natural areas, alternative energy sources, propagation of appropriate species, and pollution control, they are all aspects of environmental justice that need our help. People have more power than the earth. I mean, we can rip it apart if we want to. So I believe that human beings must constantly rebalance the scales of environmental justice. We must recycle more and pollute less. We must develop fuel cells and harness more power from the wind and the sun. We must conserve, because if we don't, no one else will. We must maintain a balance of resources. That is, we must balance what we take from the earth with what we put back. Social justice is closely allied with economic justice, for the injustices that people suffer almost always are economic in the broadest sense of the word. Anti-racism work, fair housing laws, equal opportunity for employment, affirmative action, anti-discrimination efforts, universal health care, all these movements and many more fall into the category of social justice, and they constantly need our help. At this time in our society, corporations and government agencies seem to have more power than people do. Maybe it was always that way. Maybe we're just more aware of it now. But it sure seems that the people right now are holding the short end of the stick. The minimum wage, for example. Like a car that hasn't had an oil change in 50,000 miles, the minimum wage is way overdue for adjustment. And yet, who has the power here? Congress. Congress has the power, and it's given itself a raise several times since it raised the minimum wage. It's obvious to me that the scales are tipped toward special interest groups. Another example is how onerous it is for gay men and women, or transgendered people, to acquire what cisgendered men and women take for granted and acquire easily. For instance, in Arkansas, physicians are forbidden in Arkansas from offering gender reassignment treatment to anyone under the age of 18. That's not justice driven by family values, no. That's people in power who are frightened into being mean-spirited. There are literally thousands of opportunities to rebalance the scales of social justice. They await our help. I think we can and should do more, but I'm not going to get out in front of this congregation about this. Leading from the front is a sure way to be shot by either side. I will continue to suggest that we should help to establish justice. And so I return to another form of my original question. What is it that we ought to be doing? What is it that we can do? To paraphrase Ralph Waldo Emerson, this church will be known for something. What will it be?
Our time together is nearly finished, but our work is not done. May our spirits be renewed and our resolve strengthened as we meet the challenges of the week to come. Please help me close the service now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. My name is Wayne Johnson, and I'm happy that you could join us for this service. Please come back whenever you like. We will post another virtual church service next Sunday. Please contact the minister or the caring team if you or someone you know needs help during this time. Our services are recorded in advance, so current events may move faster than our ability to address them in a timely fashion. However, you can find up-to-date information on local events, social justice issues, inspiration, and content for all ages on our Facebook page. If you are interested in joining the membership of this church and becoming more involved in the congregational life, please register for the Path of Membership class on May 16th. Please register for the Zoom meeting on our website, HVUUC.org. Look for the News and Events tab. For our postlude today, we have a spelling lesson. That's how you spell UU. As you make it through your week, remember that you are good, you are loved, we all need a little work, and we're all in this together. There's nothing left to say but, yay, church!
In a little country schoolhouse many years ago, they were talking about religion, which is now a big no-no. One day the teacher asked the class to tell the church where they went. There were Methodists and Baptists and Holy Rollers of the Covenant. One boy said, my church's name is just too big to say. He said, I'll have to spell it. And he started out this way. He said,
U-N-I.
That's a way to begin.
T-A-R.
That's next letters in.
I-A-N.
Those are the third.
U-N-I.
It's a brand new word.
B-E-R.
Just filling in.
S-A-M.
Getting near the end. U-N-I-T-A-R-I-N. U-N-I-B-E-R-S-A-L-I-S-T. That is the way to spell U-U. said we like Jesus, but we like Buddha too. It's not about the religion, it's whatever works for you. We try not to be too serious, and we know how to laugh. Wouldn't you rather be smiling when you walk your spiritual path? He said we're not judgmental, and it's okay if you like wine. We're not afraid of the devil, just prepackaged paradigms. He said,
You and I,
that's the way to begin.
T-A-R,
Those are the next letters in.
I-A-N,
Those are the third.
you and I,
It's a brand new word.
B-E-R,
Just filling in.
S-A-M,
Getting near the end. U-N-I-T-A-R-I-N, U-N-I-B-E-R-S-A-L-I-S-T. That is the way to spell you. That's the way to begin.
T-A-R,
Those are the next letters in.
I-A-N,
Those are the third.
U-N-I,
This is a brand new word.
B-E-R,
Filling in.
S-A-M,
Getting near the end. U-N-I-T-A-R-I-N, U-N-I-B-E-R-S-A-L-I-S-T. That is the way to spell you.